We'll do another swing.
Very
so
giggly all of a sudden.
I know. It's just the rosé. Excuse me. I'm going to start over.
Hello, everyone. I'm Izzy.
And I'm Jessica.
And this is The Greatest Genre, a.k.a. Romantasy.
Romantasy?
Which is what we're now calling it.
Yes. And we will be rereading, dissecting, and fully fangirling over the exhaustive works of Sarah J. Maas, starting with ACOTAR.
Yes, and today's episode, we will be focusing on chapters 16 through 19. The first portion of the episode will be completely spoiler-free. Mm-hmm. We're going to be speaking exclusively about the events that unfold within those chapters, sharing thoughts and analyses, and also referencing events from previous chapters. So that's going to go for like 2/3 of our time. Our final third is going to be a spoiler section. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a very different story.
Yep.
For those of you who have not already completely torn, fill her up, have not completely torn through ACOTAR, TOG, and CC, you do not want to be exposed to spoilers. We will give you a very clear warning.
Very clear.
There'll be sirens, there'll be directions, commands, announcements to exit the podcast. We will be dissecting everything.
Yeah, we got some good stuff back there today, too.
Oh, yeah, we do. Lots of notes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now that our glasses are full, some quick housekeeping.
Yes.
Notes before we get started. The Greatest Genre will, from time to time, contain adult content and adult language.
Yes. Because I can't really control myself.
Especially when there are pools of starlight involved.
You just have so many opinions about the starlight. Secondly, if you have not already, please subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel. I can't even look at you right now, Jessica. You're making me laugh. You can listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but we highly recommend our YouTube channel. We like to have visual aids sometimes. Mm-hmm. Also, please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform. We are on Instagram at @the_greatest genre. We're on Twitter at greatest genre. Please email us at thegreatestgenre@gmail.com. Really switching it up here. And
the
a final
brand
request.
is strong.
The brand is strong. The seed is strong. I'm so sorry.
Ew.
Finally, a request. Please keep things kind in the comments.
Please be respectful of one another. This is an amazing community, positive community. We all just want to love these books together. So, without further ado, we left our girl Feyre in a very traumatic situation.
Let's circle back to that. We're going to go over the wall into Prythian and dive into chapters 16 through 19 of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Jessica, take it away, my girl.
I'm ready.
Take a nice sip.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to sit back, relax, and listen to you.
Are you ready?
Yes, always.
All right, here we go. Chapter 16 brings us back to the spring court as Feyre is enjoying a cup of molten chocolate, while Alice brushes her hair after she has just gotten to soak in a bath.
We're going to come back to that.
For a while. And I just really we have way too much to talk about in our discussion, so I'm just going to do a quick interjection that the food descriptions are on the up and up. This molten chocolate sounds decadent.
Also, can you name a more elite vibe? I dare you.
No.
This is pure bliss.
Yeah.
Minus having just almost died from the Naga, but
I think I would deal with the Naga if I got this on the other end of it. I really do. Anyways.
It's a fair point.
So, coming back, Alice actually opens up to Feyre in this scene, and she tells Feyre a little bit about her family, starts explaining how younglings are very precious to the Fae, and of course we're going to talk about all this in detail. Then at dinner, Feyre learns even more about the Fae when Lucien bursts her bubble that Fae very much can lie.
Very tough, the Feyre.
Iron.
I loved how much they loved telling her to.
Oh, he was smug. Smug. There's also a very tense moment between Feyre and Tamlin after Lucien exits the dining room. I mean, lately, yeah. I'm not talking about tense, uncomfortable. I'm talking about, like,
sexual
tension.
Mm-hmm. You can cut it with a knife. I'm so sorry. I keep interrupting you. Please continue.
Butter knife. Tamlin again offers to help her write to her family, which Feyre takes a lot of offense to. Tamlin also reveals to her something pretty unexpected about the Great War between the humans and the Fae, and again, we will get into all of this later. She then rather coarsely blurts out to Tamlin that she likes to paint, to which he responds that they have a gallery that he wants to show her, and he's going to get her all of the painting supplies that she could ever want. Chapter 17. Feyre is awoken from sleep by terrible screaming that she relates to the sound of an animal suffering. She rushes downstairs and sees a blue fairy whose back has been absolutely torn to shreds. The fairy sobs and just repeats over and over again, "She took my wings."
Not me crying
I'm
while
trying
rereading this
so
chapter
hard not to get emotional right
in front
now.
of my hairdresser.
Feyre holds the fairy's hand and strokes its hair as it dies, promising that it will get its wings back. And I can't talk about that any further or I'm going to cry.
Understood.
We'll get to it later. So chapter 18. The next day, Tamlin, Lucien, and Feyre go on a very weird 3-person date to a glen for a picnic. And then Tamlin and Feyre leave Lucien on the picnic blanket alone.
Jessica has some notes.
For many hours. And he takes Feyre to this pool of starlight. While they are hanging out next to and eventually in the pool, Tamlin shares with Feyre Lucien's backstory, which is very interesting. Feyre decides to strip down to her underthings and have herself a swim in the pool of starlight with the High Lord of the Spring Court. Once again, very palpable tension here. I have notes. On the way back to the manor, Lucien and Feyre have actually a nice moment of real friendship as he apologizes for hesitating before coming to save her from the Naga. And he offers her a hunting knife as sort of, an offer of
peace offering.
Of real friendship, I think, which was nice. Chapter 19, Tamlin takes Feyre to see the gallery. She cries. She spends the next few weeks painting, and even though it does bring her some happiness, she is also consumed with guilt and is just really at war with herself. And one night in particular, she just becomes really overwhelmed with frustration, storms into the garden, has a little bit of a tantrum, tears a rose from the bush, cutting her hand on its thorns. Tamlin heals her hand by kissing it.
Oh my
which
god.
Is just criminal, if you ask me. And he tells her that she shouldn't feel guilty and says that he finds her human joy, her human emotions to be fascinating. The next day, Feyre catches Tamlin in a snare while she is walking around in the woods, and some truly incredible banter ensues as he reads dirty poems to her whilst hanging upside down.
No, I don't think he's hanging upside down when he actually reads the poems.
I thought he was.
No, he like flips around, becomes upright, and then he's like holding it outside of her reach while he's reading them.
See, this is why I need the audiobook that makes me listen to every word. He then also shares some pretty interesting details about his own story with her and about his parents. And on their way back to the manor, they notice some bonfires being built, which Tamlin explains are for a very fairy festival called Calanmai, which Feyre is decidedly not invited to. And the chapter comes to kind of a chilling close when a creature appears that Feyre cannot see. Tamlin and Lucien order her to hide, to not make a sound, to not move, while they converse with this creature, which is called the ACOTAR. And they send the creature away, and everyone is thoroughly unsettled by this encounter. And that is where we close our chapters for the day.
Nicely done, Jess. So let's start easy. This scene
through.
with Alice and Feyre with the cup of molten chocolate.
I want to drink molten chocolate while Alice brushes my hair.
She's such a Mrs. Potts. She is.
Oh.
She refuses to let Feyre go downstairs until she's had a cup of hot chocolate. She's brushing her hair with like her scalp. It's like those things, like the head,
Oh my God.
the massages.
Yeah.
That's what I imagine this to be like. But this is cool because we've realized finally, we didn't know this before, but we realized that Alice isn't actually a Spring Court native. She comes from the Summer Court.
Right.
And she lets us in on a couple of key bits of information, mostly about the Fae aging and reproduction, the younglings.
Yes.
So Fae young do not reach maturity until, she says, about age 75. And
so much, much, much slower, obviously, than mortals.
Exactly. There is a line that says, the younglings are far more precious to the high fae. Very important note that the high fae reproduce differently than fairies.
Yes, and for the high fae, for whatever reason, younglings are very, 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 very rare.
Yes. And
so they are considered to be
more precious than jewels, than wealth, than anything.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing.
It really is.
I think. I just think it's it humanizes them, I think. Because we've heard so much about their cruelty and how scary they are. And
we find out more about how that maybe isn't all it seems.
Yes.
Later on
that's
in these
true.
chapters.
But I just thought it was a really lovely... It's a very
the ties
pure,
that bind beings together.
It's a very pure love, I think, to value young, innocent life so much.
I agree.
And I just remember reading that for the first time, and then when I reread it, it gives a different feel to the high fae rather than just these very primal, fearsome beings.
And I thought this was a different...
They also love their children very much,
that
which
being
is very
said,
human.
I thought it was a very interesting contrast, and we'll talk about this a little more later, between how Alice describes fae loving their young and about Lucian being the youngest of 7, and about he had a not so warm and cushy upbringing.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about more of that later. But I did think it was interesting how she said that they were so rare, and then Tamlin throws in later that Lucian is the youngest of 7. So that's something we'll unpack a little bit later. But it was an important little world-building note that I wanted to call out with the Fae aging. So once Feyre has been brushed.
Yes, first she was plucked.
Now she's been
brushed.
And fed, in a manner of speaking, with hot chocolate. She is going down to dinner with Lucian, Tamlin, and Feyre. I mean, Lucian and Tamlin. And another key bit of information, another myth debunked, we should say.
One that Feyre has really been holding on to for a long time.
Like, in the most literal sense, almost repeatedly in the first, I would say, 10 chapters. She's like, okay, but they can't lie. So
many times we've heard that the Fae can't lie.
But they're telling me it's true.
I will say, I wonder how the story would have gone if that were true. Do you know what I mean?
Would have been difficult.
Because I did think to myself when I was reading it, I was like, okay, this is really interesting.
And
like,
you know
if
what,
this is really a rule in this world,
that's
then
true,
I'm
because
very
they omit
intrigued.
a lot rather than lie. Fae will choose to not tell you things rather than tell you an outright lie. Because even in later books, I'm trying to think of, like, straight-up lies that I've heard, and I'm actually drawing a little bit of a blank. I'm sure if I could find some,
Lucian does tell her they consider it to be an art form.
Yes.
And so I think just a blatant, outright lie, they almost consider to be, like, lazy.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
You
I
know,
like that. Because that's so cunning.
Right. They want to
Especially
be
Lucian.
very tricksy.
Yeah, and you know that Lucian loves doing this.
Yeah, Lucian, he is a fox, isn't he?
I love him so much. It's becoming a problem. I'm rereading these and my love is like tenfold. But he eventually leaves the room and Tamlin and Feyre are left alone, and he produces this list of words, and it's the same list that she wrote down earlier because she was unable to pronounce them, and we talked in the previous episode about what a humanizing moment that was for us to read about, watching her struggle over these. And Tamlin produces this, and he doesn't do it in any kind of malicious way whatsoever, but her
the best of
immediate-
intentions, but I think this shame is so deep for her. It's such a source of insecurity and self-loathing that she can't even be in the same room with it while
she gets
he's
up and
there.
she
And
leaves.
so she gets up and tries to leave, and he stops her.
Yes.
And I love that he just states, "I'm not insulting you." My guy, that's not how this works. Like, you can't just tell someone that you're not insulting them. Just like you can't look at someone and be like, "No, I didn't offend you." It's like, that's No. This works actually the other way around, where like
is how someone
they
receives.
tell you
Yes.
how they feel. You don't get to dictate that to them. And I think
But I think we've established that Tamlin maybe isn't the best.
well,
at this.
we definitely learn a little bit more about why
Yes.
in this episode, which we'll talk about very shortly.
But he does have a very hot moment where he kind of grabs
Honestly,
her
this
arm,
whole moment is very hot because anytime that he like steps
gently
in her path,
says, "Do you even know how to laugh?"
"Oh my
Oh,
god!" just
swoon!
and he's so big.
Yes, very tall,
He's just
with golden brown skin,
really broad.
with calloused hands.
Lest we forget.
He makes sure that she knows her family is safe and cared for, which
Again.
is also very attractive.
Again,
Like,
yeah.
he is reinforcing
He's
this with
trying.
her.
Yeah, I think you're spot on by saying there was no malicious intent here.
None
He is
at
trying
all.
to do the opposite of making her feel shame. He is trying to make her feel safe. He's trying to make her feel at ease.
And when he says, "What about I'll be your friend?" and she says,
Oh
"Can
my-
a high fae even be friends with a human?"
I
and then
loved
this is
that.
a really important moment
I
because this
loved
is
that moment. What about a friend?
yeah, and this is really when I think we start discovering there are two very different types of high fae. Because he, and I'm going to quote this, he explains a little bit about his history, and then he says, "Against slavery, against tyranny, I would gladly go to my death, no matter whose freedom I was defending." And this is a really important quote to hold on to throughout this entire series.
It's a line in the sand. It actually was, because he also tells her that in the Great War between mortals and fae, that many high fae fought with the humans because they did not believe that it was right for the fae to enslave them.
Absolutely. So even though she's a little upset that Tamlin reveals that he glamoured her family.
Oh yeah, we need to talk about that too.
And she says, "Oh, fairy arrogance," but he glamoured her family to make sure that they were safe, well cared for, that they would leave at any sign of something being amiss in Prithian. They would get far away if they got even a whiff of danger. So despite being initially frustrated with that situation, Feyre does end up thinking to herself, "I might have asked him to do this if I'd known that he had this ability." It's kind of like a truce moment between them.
And you know what else I think that actually just occurred to me as you were sort of repeating that line? Because she thinks, wow, he's so arrogant. He took these liberties. I think this is actually a moment where I think Feyre's been a little bit arrogant too.
She checks herself a little.
And she is kind of humbled here because
She's like, "This is actually a good person."
There's no way for her to escape the good that Tamlin has done and the lengths that he has gone to truly protect her family more than any other being ever could have.
Yeah, or would like bother to. And it's just it's really, really sweet, and it's a really special moment between them.
And I love when I reread that scene, I had totally forgotten that they had a moment where he said, "What about a friend?"
It's such a special moment.
It's
an olive branch.
I just thought that was my favorite moment that I've re-experienced thus far.
And it was a very special moment, kind of abruptly ended by the fact that she goes, "Paint!"
I mean, here's the thing. I can relate so much to being in a situation where you are so flustered and overcome by, like, the crush. We talked about this last episode.
Yeah.
Crushes are very intense.
They take over your entire body chemistry.
I understand what happened in Feyre's body.
You understand. I understand. We all understand.
We
what was happening
understand
there.
that didn't make it any easier to read because you just want to be like, oof, that sucks. That sucks for us. That sucks for you. That was tough. And he goes, you like art? You know that I hope Lucian was standing around the corner going like this.
Oh, yes, exactly.
You're
for the love
kidding.
of God, man.
For the love of the cauldron.
Cauldron, boil me. Oh, no.
Oh my god, that's my new favorite thing I'm gonna imagine now when I read scenes between Tamlin and Feyre. I'm gonna picture
Just
Lucian eavesdropping.
With the furrowed brow, just like, oh my god.
What would his commentary be from around the corner? That's a fun game.
Maybe we'll play that in the blooper reel.
I think we should. I think we should do some acting out of what it could be.
Don't tease me with a good time, Jess. Tamlin agrees to get her paints, brushes. He says, paint wherever you want. The house is too clean.
And they have a gallery.
They have a gallery,
They have
which
an
he's
art
going to
gallery.
get cleaned up for her a little bit. So it's kind of like the gravity of that situation, that conversation. There's this moment of levity afterwards, and it's like, okay, something to look forward to. And there's a very nice little moment, and we end that chapter on a high note. I think
she walks away. He grins at her.
Yeah.
He really smiles at her. And as she walks away, she can't
stop smiling. Which is such a, we've all done that. I know. Oh, it's such a great moment, which is kind of in comparison to the beginning of chapter 17, which takes a very different turn. First of all, Feyre is awoken from a truly unpleasant nightmare. And I just want to touch on this. She's like mentioned some trouble sleeping beforehand.
Yeah, she's had some nasty nightmares before.
And these also resurface later on in these chapters that we're talking about. But she dreams of a woman with blood red nails torturing her, which is just a really specific and scary image. But she's woken by this commotion, and she goes downstairs to see a really horrible scene. And this is, you and I can't reread this without some kind of
I was walking around
tears.
I was walking in DuPont over the weekend listening to this on my audiobook. I actually got so caught up in the emotion because the emotions are so high in this scene.
You don't even notice.
The AI voice didn't really affect me anywhere near as much, but this was so heartbreaking. This was so heartbreaking, and you really feel Feyre's
empathy too towards
her empathy, her anger, like that moment where she looks at Tamlin and she's like, who could be so cruel? Who could do this? And I think we've all felt that, you know, if we see something horrible on the news, that emotion of just feeling so helpless in the face of something horrible. I think SJM did a really good job of creating without telling, right? Like she put us right in that room. We were holding his hand. We were listening to his sobs.
And I think one of the reason it hit so hard was because we just had this really lovely moment, like literally 2 paragraphs before.
And we found out that the Fae, like some of the Fae fought with the humans. There's more to them than just these fearsome beings.
Yeah, and this is our first fairy that we see besides the Suriel, who is clearly not evil. Like nothing, there's nothing bad about this fairy. He's blue, he has spindly limbs, he's tall.
Yeah.
And what's happened is that someone has clearly taken his wings.
Ripped, yeah. I think Feyre says it looked like someone had ripped
had sawed them off slowly. And it is incredibly bloody. Reading about this fairy dying as Feyre holds his hand legitimately like had me in tears. And the fact that she lied to him on his deathbed to make him feel better, to just make him feel at peace.
And we know how seriously she takes promises.
Yes,
and she promises him. She even says it's the first false promise I've ever made.
And she had to make it. She felt like, and it actually reminded me of that scene in Outlander when Claire, she lies to one of the clansmen as he's dying in her arms, and she's like, "You will see your home again." Just to make him feel better. Oh my God, I'm gonna start crying. Just to make him feel better as he was, passing.
It's
such a
it's
powerful
empathy,
moment.
but it's also it's a moment of mercy and compassion.
Yeah.
And I think this show of compassion from Feyre to a fairy it's so monumental considering how much hatred she had in
it's a really important point.
Her heart this whole up to this point,
this is where
really
Tamlin starts
in the
to
book.
See her differently too.
After that. Yep. I had that note as well. That I think he's very affected by this. Yeah. I think he was very, very moved by the way that Feyre reacts to this situation. She handled it much better than Lucian.
Yeah, Lucian vomits into a pot, I think, or some sort of vessel in the hallway.
I think it was a potted plant, actually.
And he just leaves the room. He's like ghostly pale,
very, very, very upset, and we disturbed by this whole scene.
Why this is later on in the chapters, but yeah, this is a really powerful moment between Tamlin, Feyre, and the Blue Fairy. We also get some more little tidbits of this she that we've heard of. She took my wings. And God, the fact that he kept repeating it and repeating it.
That's the only thing he said.
And something or someone is truly terrorizing people.
I mean, we knew there was
this
otherworldly darkness of some kind, but there is someone.
And we don't yet know if this connects to the blight or not, but like there is clearly something huge going on that Feyre is not yet clued into, and this is just another little indicator that is happening. This quote, I wouldn't want to die alone, when Tamlin is asking her why she did it. I want someone to hold my hand until the end, and a while after that. That's something everyone deserves. And that just speaks to that huge shift that Feyre goes through in this scene, having started this series as someone who hates the Fae. A little bit of a religious aspect with the prayer that Tamlin utters.
To the cauldron?
I was going to say it's always a little tough when...
Yeah, the cauldron aspect of it is tough, but there is based on the words of the prayer, there is clearly an afterlife
that they believe in.
Which I did think was significant. You know, I think it's also a moment where I wondered if maybe Feyre sometimes was afraid that she would die alone.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because I don't think
we know the answer, but it's a good observation.
Yeah, that's not something I've ever been worried about for myself. Just because I've been fortunate enough to have like a family and amazing, wonderful friends. But we've talked so much about how isolated and alone that she's felt. I think that probably is something that she's thought about. You know, she's probably had moments out in the woods where she wonders, what if I die here and I'm alone?
I think when she experiences this blue fairy, we don't know his name, experience much the same emotions that she feels that she would if she was in this situation. Yeah. She was like, I would want someone to do what I did, you know, for me.
Well, and think about...
She starts experiencing true remorse for the first time over what she did.
Yes, and this brings me to exactly what I was thinking just before, too, which is think about how she felt absolutely nothing. Do you remember that opening chapter? Mm-hmm. She looks at the dead thing and she says, I wish I could bring myself to feel remorse for it.
Yes, that's such a good point.
But it was the forest and it's winter, and she just turns around and leaves it. And she feels nothing, and that is such a stunning contrast, I think,
what's going on
to
here.
Everything that she feels in this moment for this fairy who...
God, I love Sarah J. Maas. She just knows how to write these scenes. So, and if you guys haven't read her other stuff, like, I'm so excited for you, but she seriously knows how to tap into the deepest part of your emotions, stick a knife in you, twist it around, and make you cry in public.
Yeah. And then be like, thank you, can I have some more?
Yes, exactly. I would like 17 more books, please. So this scene ends. Tamlin goes to bury the fairy. He says he needs to go do it alone. The next morning, everything's been cleaned up. There is no evidence this has happened. Yeah. And Tamlin's meeting is canceled. They decide to go for a ride. Jessica has some notes about this date.
This whole entire sequence.
Honestly, it's what we needed after this scene is a little bit of content to have a giggle about. Because do you think she meant it this way when she was writing it? Like, I truly actually don't know.
I don't either. Because my experience reading it for the second time was very different than my experience reading it for the first time. Because my experience reading it for the first time was twofold. Onefold is that I could tell from the get-go that there was going to be some sort of spiciness, probably mild. I thought for sure we were going to get our first kiss here when I read it for the first time. And I was bitterly disappointed when I was robbed of the experience.
Yeah.
But then even when I read it the first time, though, I felt like it was they were like oddly forced into a situation where they were alone together.
I find it funny. I didn't have as visceral a reaction to this as you did.
It wasn't visceral when I read it the first time. When I read it the second time, it was visceral, and here's where the AI voice comes back in because I was listening to it.
In case we didn't make it clear, Jessica has ACOTAR on audiobook.
I do. I have it on audiobook.
It's a funny little voice that reads to you.
I thought it was gonna be like when I got the Lord of the Rings audiobook and it was Andy. Oh my
Andy
God.
Serkis?
Yes, Gollum.
Yes.
Yes, he reads the
Oh,
Lord of
that's
the
so
Rings.
funny. I
audiobook
have
that
a different one.
and it's amazing. So my expectations were very high,
Right.
and then I started this audiobook and I was like, oh,
This is different.
No. Yeah, it's like Alexa is reading you A Court of Thorns and Roses, trying to do the voices.
Hey Alexa, read chapter 18. Or don't, apparently.
Anyway,
think about
so
it.
listening to this chapter on audiobook was very, very difficult. Especially because I was on the treadmill at the time.
Yeah, that's tough.
So I was in physical discomfort and emotional
So
discomfort.
tell me why you hated this.
Okay, first of all, why is Lucian there?
Okay, that actually is a valid point.
Why is Lucian there? This is clearly a date for Feyre and Tamlin. Why is Lucian there?
My favorite is when they get to the Glen and Feyre is looking out at the trees and
She's
how beautiful
taking it all
the
in,
grass.
and
it
that's
is. It's
fine.
stunning.
That's great.
And again, just a quick little note about the writing here is SJM, as always, does a really beautiful job of just describing how whimsical and beautiful and magical everything in Prithian, specifically in the Spring Court, is.
Yes.
It is stunning.
Yes. I can feel the sunshine on my face.
She says, thick golden light. Just little things like that. I want to be here when
Yes.
she describes them.
Yes.
However, her back is to... I feel like I have to pull it up. She hears... Oh, here it
They're
is.
doing weird...
Here, no, I've got the quote. Here we go. Rushed whispers were exchanged behind me, and before I could turn around to investigate, Tamlin took a seat at my side. Lucian is totally encouraging him behind his back, being like, go.
Ew! Ick! That is such an ick for me.
When a man doesn't know how to flirt?
Demerit for Tamlin. Why is your friend there being like, you can do it. Go sit next to her.
Yeah, especially if you've been alive for 500 years old and doesn't know how to flirt. It's a very tough look.
Ick.
He's rambling.
Ick. This whole sequence is very ick to me. And Lucian gets left on the picnic blanket.
He's reclining on
With-
this blanket, saluting them with the wine, being
with
go
the
have fun,
booze.
kids.
At least just make up a story. Be like, oh no, I just heard someone call my name. I have to leave. Even that would have been, you know what I mean?
Maybe it's because, you know how,
I feel like Tamlin, I feel like Lucian, maybe the whispering was Lucian being like, okay, I'm gonna go. You're good.
And then
I'm
Tamlin
gonna
was
go.
like,
And
no, I
Tamlin's
need you
no,
here.
you can't leave.
No.
That's worse.
That is worse. No, I wish you hadn't said that. 'Cause
I'm
now I
so
can't
sorry.
unthink it. Oh no.
Lucian is doing this very weird third wheel / wingman at the
Situation.
same time deal. I don't like it. And Feyre and Tamlin then... Tamlin's like, I have to show you something.
Okay, I must need you to backtrack a little bit because he doesn't say it like that, Jessica. Your feelings are getting in the way of you
It
describing
sounds
facts.
pervy to me.
Oh no.
I have something to show you.
He means the Starlight Pool, Jessica. Not everything is an innuendo. So they go on a nice little walk together. His powerful muscles showing through his
leaping and bounding over logs, and
With
Feyre's
very precise movements.
struggling over stuff, which I very much relate to.
And that's like when you and me go on a hike. And
Yeah. Or when I go on a run with you, and you're just like, and I'm like huffing and puffing. I'm like, leave me. Go on without me.
But on this, when they get to this pool, Feyre is, again, overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. It looks like starlight. But before they very slowly derobe in front of each other,
Weird.
they...
It was weird.
We're not there yet.
It was uncomfortable.
Tamlin tells her about Lucian's very sad past. So, to summarize it, his story is very sad. He's the youngest of 7.
In the
Killed
Autumn Court.
In the Autumn Court. He is the youngest son of the High Lord of the Autumn Court.
Who sounds like a real nice guy.
Yeah, he's a dick. He's a dick.
Proper.
Proper asshole. He killed one of his brothers after they set out to kill him for leaving the Autumn Court.
Yes, but...
And Tamlin killed the other one.
Well, and he left the Autumn Court because...
They killed someone that he was in love with and forced him
a female who was considered to be inappropriate.
Lucian fell in love
For
with a
him.
fairy whom his father considered to be grossly inappropriate for someone of his bloodline. We'll go into
Another trope.
I know.
Forbidden love.
Seriously.
Yeah,
That's
that
one of the
one.
best.
That one will get
What do you think? Forced proximity or forbidden love?
Oh my god, forbidden love. Enemies to lovers and forbidden love, I think, are like tied for top 2 to me.
I have to think about mine.
Okay.
But we'll go into Lucian's backstory a little more, but it is important that we touch on it briefly. It kind of explains a little bit as to why he reacted to the blue fairy the way he did. Certain things, like they bring back a lot of bad
Well, and that's
memories.
not even
That's
to
not even
say like
the
how
whole
he got his eye situation. Yeah. So it's, I think Tamlin says something along the
He says
lines
it's
to her that
cutthroat.
Lucian, yes, the
Autumn
Autumn
Court
Court
is
is very cutthroat, and Lucian has experienced things that make
what he saw.
very difficult. I mean, it was very triggering to him, clearly,
Yeah.
of probably things that he's experienced, which is horrible.
So to escape from thinking about this, Feyre goes, "I'd love to go for a swim," and she starts undressing in front of Tamlin, very slowly, making direct eye contact with him. I'm sorry, Jessica. You cannot tell me this was not exciting for you to read.
No, it was the first time.
Well, what made it so different the second time? I'm sorry.
Besides the creepy AI voice, here's
watching
the other
a man
thing.
unbutton his shirt as he looks directly in your eyes and you unbutton it, don't tell me that isn't hot.
First of all, if he had done it first and just been like, do whatever you want, I'm getting in the pool, that would have been a different story. But he's pushing her.
No,
like,
he's not.
Yes,
he stops
is.
as soon as she goes no, and then he tells the story of Lucian's past, and then she goes, you know what? No, I'm not going to give anyone a reason to, like, I'm not going to be embarrassed anymore. I'm just going to take ownership of my own whatever, and I'm going to undress. I think you're reading it. Listen, no one reads anything wrong. You're allowed to feel whatever you want to feel. I think you are blowing this out of proportion a little bit.
And I'm admitting to you that I think hearing the creepy AI voice read about Feyre slowly taking her clothes off
might have had something to do with it.
definitely made it a different experience.
That's fair. That's a valid point.
I was very uncomfortable.
Oh, no. So they both get in the pool.
And they don't even so much as like brush hands.
Jessica, sometimes it's the slow burn.
I
It's the
agree.
best.
I'm just saying when I read it the first time, I
You wanted
remember
them to
being like,
kiss. No! There's a nice moment when Tamlin goes, "Where did you learn how to like swim?" And she's
oh,
like,
she
"I
taught
taught
herself how to
myself."
swim.
She's like, "I taught myself." That's like another indicator as to how self-sufficient she is. Just one of the many that we've already seen. And then Feyre tells Tamlin about her family and her past and how her father was
Yes.
the Prince of Merchants. And a little bit about how they lost their fortune. And there's this really nice moment where it's like you be on a date and you're just telling the person you're with like about your background.
100%.
and
This
about
is
your past.
absolutely a great first date. I've never personally stripped down to my undergarments and skinny dipped in a pool on a first date.
They weren't skinny dipping. They were in their under things.
And they're under things, excuse me. However, no, they're on a very great first date, except for the fact that Lucian...
He's not there, though. He can't see. They had to walk very far away to get here. I am also... Listen,
But, like,
I need
how-
you to know that
If you were Feyre, I would just be constantly being like, so is Lucian, like, also gonna come get in the pool? Like, did you tell
she's very
him
taken by Tamlin. by the
where
high
we
wall.
were going? Is he waiting for us? Those are questions I would have.
They're important questions. The answer is no to all of them.
I
He was
suppose.
just up there, and they eventually make their way back after... What you did say was valid, though, was several hours, it seems like. At least
They
two
were
or
there for
three.
a long time.
And they come back. Lucian's just, like, chilling on this picnic blanket, and they all ride back.
He's a hell of a wingman. I would have left you.
That's good to know for our future.
No, I wouldn't have. Not if you asked me to stay.
Lucian, like, falls
But
back
I would have been.
because-
We would have had a chat about it after.
That's fair. And that might have happened off page, if you will. There's this really nice moment where we kind of feel Feyre and Lucian actually solidifying like a solid friendship.
Yeah, I feel like they've buried
she
the
kind of
hatchet.
calls him out a little bit
Yeah.
in a kind of roundabout way, being like, thanks for your help with the cereal. And he was like, I'm really sorry that I hesitated and I didn't come quick enough. And he gives her this hunting knife
Even though she hates hunting.
Yes, but it's the symbolism
It
of
is.
the thing.
You're correct.
You just really hate this chapter and everything that happens in it.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
But it just seemed like this really nice moment where Feyre and Lucien, the olive branch has been extended, Hatchet has been buried, and like these two are now like allies. That brings us into chapter 19, and this is the gallery scene.
Which is an incredibly well done rendition of the library scene from Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, you are right. Oh my goodness.
I've never seen so many books in all my life. And I gotta say, I relate a lot more to Belle in that moment than I do to Feyre in this one. And again, we have to apologize. Anyone who's listening who is a big art drawing, painting person.
And maybe you can tell us, is this how people who love art speak about art?
Yeah, I would love to hear. I would love to hear how these scenes affected you, because it was difficult for me to relate to her. The way that, like, even watching the original, like, Beauty and the Beast moment where she, like, walks into this library and he's like, all these books are yours. I would have wept.
I
would have wept.
It doesn't feel to me like SJM is an artist and, like, doesn't know how to, like, describe loving art in a way that, like, translates off the page, because every time Feyre describes something, I'm like...
I think what we're really learning about ourselves, actually, is that we're just really not...
art girls?
Art girlies.
That being said, so Feyre really leans into the painting thing.
Yeah, she throws herself into it, and I was in that
I
moment. I was excited.
Me
for
too,
her.
and I loved reading about
felt
how like
lighter
jumping out
and like
of bed.
liberated. Yeah,
she was like getting excited to get up in the morning. She was no longer feeling dread, throwing on clothes, going and she's painting all day, and she's barely stopping to like eat and sleep. Like all she wants, and she's feeling. It's like the way she never had time for a hobby before, and now she's fully getting to experience the love and the joy that you feel from doing something that is an outlet for you. It was really nice to read about that. That goes hand in hand.
I picture a montage.
I know, me too. Me too. What song would it be? There she goes. Oh, that's Parent Trap.
Also feels a little bit off for the
general genre. Anyway, I picture a montage, and so do you.
Yes. A Feyre painting montage.
Yes. And this goes hand in hand with her still feeling a lot of worry. Tamlin still goes out every night, and he's hunting various things, scary things at the borders, and he comes back covered in blood. There's an important line where she says, he never gives Feyre details, and she never presumes to ask. It's very much like he is carrying this burden alone, not involving anyone, and I think that makes her more worried. She doesn't actually know what's going on truly. There's this one day, and it actually really comes on over a couple of weeks, where she starts to feel, like you mentioned in your summaries, like some guilt and some sadness for having such a lovely
literally
time.
just for being happy.
Yeah.
And I think she's angry at herself for not being
happy.
able to just feel happy.
She's really getting into her feelings. She's having a spiral, and we've all had them.
Well, she's never really faced.
Yeah.
We've even been with her as she's been like shutting these feelings down when they come up. She's for so long refused to allow herself to feel anything, because all that matters is surviving to see the next day. But as we all who are emotive human beings know, you cannot do that forever. It doesn't work. And especially when you are doing something as cathartic as creating art, those are going to come up.
Yeah,
they're going to come back to the surface, and I don't think she's quite prepared.
That happens in tandem with the nightmare she starts having again.
Yes.
As she is experiencing this joy, that is cut with her experiencing really severe nightmares almost every single night. And they are all watched over by a shadow I could never quite glimpse. So again, there is this like indication as to something else. That
something is very clearly like haunting, like lingering somewhere in her psyche.
Yeah. So there's this one day at dinner where she really starts feeling it all at once, and Tamlin and Lucien kind of let her be.
I think we've all been there in moments where
a bad
things.
Day,
yeah,
man.
you have a bad day. Things just bubble. They boil. And it all builds up, and it becomes very overwhelming, and sometimes you just have to storm out into a garden and rip flowers off bushes.
And that's exactly what Feyre does. She goes out there, she injures her hand, and she is really feeling very blue and sad and down about her family Important to note that every time she thinks something bad about herself, she always imagines Nesta's voice in her head. But she and Tamlin share this really intense moment when he comes out to comfort
To the
her,
rose garden in the moonlight, by the way.
Yeah, very casual. So a couple things happen here. He asks her if she's okay, and she kind of opens up to him about the way she's feeling.
Yeah, this is big. She's never, ever admitted these types of things out loud. Because doesn't she say, everything I did for them for so long, and they didn't even try. They didn't even fight for me. They didn't even try to stop you from taking me.
And that is the big thing that she kind of finally admits to herself. It's really sad. It's like another moment where she's like, I am so alone. I think that, she's hasn't felt that for a couple of weeks, and then
she's been able to be very distracted by lots of things that are going on,
and now she can't. It's just this very powerful moment between the two of them. You could cut the sexual tension. It is a problem. First of all, if she says one more time that his hands are massive, I'm gonna lose it. Or if they're calloused, I can't focus.
He's just so tall.
Oh my god. Tamlin is very hot. Another thing happens in this scene that's important, besides all agreeing that Tamlin is finally a daddy.
He lifts her hand and kisses her palm and heals her, and then he puts the flower in her hair. I'm sorry, did anything else happen in this chapter? Because I've quite forgotten it.
Yes, actually. He reveals the Fae the mate thing.
Yes,
which is really important. Which is actually a huge
note.
That we
very,
thank
very
God we didn't
important.
forget about that.
Very, very caught up in the hand kissing moment.
So this is another massive thing that is going to be a theme throughout all of SJM's books.
No spoilers.
I mean, this is kind of a theme in every single fantasy romance book, is the hot mates thing, all the...
Right, so in this world, the rules surrounding mates are...
if you are lucky enough, will be able to find your mate.
And there is a bond.
I don't know if he gets into the bond that much, but
he mentions it with Lucian, and they use the word snap into place.
It is supposed to be this incredibly rare thing, and we're not going to get into that. It makes marriage...
As rare as younglings apparently are, except for in the Autumn Court, where there are 7 many.
Of them. Apparently, marriage is insignificant in comparison. Like, high fae, we will get married to each other if you are lucky enough to find your mate.
Well, and we do know
Tamlin's parents were mates.
Tamlin's parents were mates, but they do have marriage, and, for example, Feyre looks for a ring on Alice's finger and doesn't see one, so we know that they do have, they have wedding rings, which is interesting. I thought that was an interesting detail that she included, that was something that was part of their culture.
I guess, I don't know why it surprises me that, they have weddings.
It doesn't seem... The wedding rings were surprising to me, the fact that she just casually looked for a ring the way that we would in our world. I thought that was an interesting detail to decide to carry from reality into this fantasy realm. I feel like weddings are always present. They just typically, I feel like in fantasy, take more of a pagan ritual feel to them than they do a Judeo-Christian one. I was definitely caught by that casual mention of looking for a ring as an indicator that someone was married, because the pagans did things a little differently.
They sure did.
The hand fasting.
There's a lot of animosity between the pagan culture and the Christian culture.
Blood, blood binding,
a lot of that
stuff like that. That was kind of more what I was expecting to hear about in the marriage rituals of the Fae.
No marriage, but
that's fine.
Important to note.
That's nice.
So Tamlin, he explains this mating bond in the context of he tells Feyre a little bit about his family. Apparently his dad was a real piece of work. He had 2 brothers that were a real piece of work. He did love his mother. There's this very important line where he goes, fortunately or unfortunately, they were all killed by the High Lord of an enemy court.
All being his parents and his brothers.
Tamlin has also experienced a lot of loss.
And he feels very alone.
Yeah, and so this was a real moment when he and Feyre were able to connect on that level, and she has this mention, like, I'm really sorry for your loss, and they have this really special moment together. And so
there's a lot of emotional connection in these chapters for the two of them.
This is, I would say,
It's
this
just
is
very
where
Alexis Rose
this is
just
where
now.
the relationship is taking, I would say, the most milestones we've seen thus far. Emotional ones. at that.
Yeah, a lot of I think, relationship building here.
So, again, I love that SJM does this. She gives us these really heavy chapters, and then she kind of goes
She does pace it very nicely, and I
we
think
have this
that's
hilarious
important.
scene next, which is
The one
The
where
limericks.
I thought Tamlin was upside down the entire time.
no, he definitely no, because remember he's hanging upside down, and then he pulls himself up, cuts the snet, and like flips and lands on his feet.
Oh
And it
my
still
God, yes, you're
happens
right.
In a movie that I can't remember what it is, and I've been agonizing over it for the last 3 days, and it's in front of me. I can see it, but I don't see it.
Is it Peter Pan?
No, I don't know what it is. I'll leave it in the comments when I figure it out. But
Or if anyone else.
knows what I'm talking about, I have never been so sure this is a real thing. You know how SJM like
So let's be very clear so people can help us.
okay.
You think there is a movie scene that you have seen. I'm sorry. You
Yes.
have seen a movie scene.
I
I don't mean to doubt you. You have seen a movie scene where Hot Man
Yes.
is hanging
upside down
from
a tree.
From a tree.
And he flips over and lands on his feet. Yes.
He cuts the rope.
I don't know if there's a cutting involved, but I know there is a flip involved.
So he goes from being upside down and he does a flip and lands on his feet.
Yes.
That's what we know
Yes.
about the scene.
Yes.
Do you see anything about this man? Do you know what color his hair is?
I feel like he's also wearing a mask. Could it be Legend
this
of
is-
Sorrow? Does that happen in Legend of
Oh
Sorrow?
my god! Yeah.
I knew it! I knew it!
He does a lot of
He does a
flipping
lot
and
of
landing
maybe
on
that's
his
what I'm
feet,
thinking
and
of.
he is
And like a
wearing
lot of
mask.
swishing, I feel like, with
I'm
his
so
sword.
honored to have been the one to show you that movie.
That was one of our most elite movie nights. This scene with Tamlin cutting himself down from the tree, and it's totally
like
Legend of
Antonio
Sorrow.
Banderas.
Oh my god. I knew we'd get
Can
there
we find a
eventually.
place for Antonio Banderas in the ACOTAR Hulu show, please?
Send us your thoughts. Tamlin has basically...
This is very
Written-
clever.
I think it's
For-
really sweet, too, what
For
he
a
does.
man who apparently needed to be babysat on his first date, he's really upped his game. Oh my god, do you think Lucian actually wrote?
No, because I don't think... Because Tamlin has this whole backstory about... so he reveals some other stuff here. He
Oh,
reveals
yes,
that
yes,
he
yes,
used to...
He was in the war band.
in some war bands, and he definitely we kind of hear a little bit more about his backstory with the fighting. He would fight whoever his dad told him to fight, and he became
Just
very
really
good. Apparently, there was some like limerick wars. Who could write the dirtiest poems?
I mean, they were all dudes sitting around like, okay, it's
Probably
like
getting drunk
Listen,
and-
it's like I imagine. Here we go. I imagine that fantasy soldier troops, right, who spend a lot of time around other dudes and not very much time around women or like normal people who do normal stuff. They're just very weird. Like they have a weird dynamic, and they all speak a slightly different language, and they follow different social norms, not unlike baseball players.
Why baseball specifically?
Because they sit in the dugout for hours and hours and hours.
okay, I see where you're going.
And even when they're at practice, they're there for so many hours, and they're most of the time are just standing around talking to each other.
Just being boys.
Just being dudes. And that is what I imagine was going on in this war band camp, and they just
Situation.
ended up writing dirty poems
Which
for
apparently
each other.
Tamlin, as he doesn't particularly like to lose, got very good
Hot.
at. Yeah,
Sorry,
that is hot.
that might be a toxic masculine
No,
thing.
no. It is called
Hot.
confidence.
I
And
let-
a little bit.
I don't like to lose anything, so
and
I became the best.
A little bit of
Woo!
competitiveness, I think, is attractive in a person.
Yeah.
Tamlin.
If your man is the best at something,
It's hot.
That's hot.
So he starts reading
It was
Feyre
funny.
poems,
And
because
she
she's
is-
embarrassed
And
at
she
first
is
about
beat red.
because she's figuring out that he took this list of words that she was really embarrassed about, and she couldn't even stay in the same room.
Conflagration.
Yeah.
To be fair, when I first read that too, I was like,
What?
do I know what that means?
And then Tamlin like dances out of her reach while reading these
He
these
is
naughty
being
poems.
fully cheeky. And I think this is really the first time that we've seen a playful side of Tamlin. Because even though Feyre gets a lot of flack for being very serious and, like, no fun, like, Tamlin is not exactly a stand-up comedian here. He's been equally intense up until now.
That's true.
And even when he attempts to sort of be, like, you know, up until now, his attempts at anything other than being very broody and intense have fallen very flat. But this was fun to read. Banter.
It's banter. Mm-hmm. We know that Tamlin has... We don't know if he has chat, but he's got banter. They're two very different things.
Okay.
Anyone who watches Love Island will know. So after they have their little banter flirtation in the woods, they go back to the house and they are interrupted. Well, first of all, Pharisees' bonfires being set up.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Cal and Mai next episode.
Yeah, we specifically...
All we know is that Feyre is not invited.
The reason we did 4 chapters is because we felt like we couldn't stop halfway through Callum 9.
Yes,
so.
There are some events that happen over the next 6 chapters that kind of need to be addressed together.
So we're only doing 4. But she's not invited.
No.
Apparently there's a ritual. It's very fairy. That's the
fairy.
only kind of indication that we get that something spicy.
Let me tell you something.
It is very
That would
fairy.
have put my antenna
way up. And on the way back, they are interrupted by basically Tamlin being like, "Be quiet, don't move. Something is very, very wrong."
Which is scary, but also hot.
I mean, yeah.
The whole, like,
Stay
hide
out
behind me.
Oh, yeah. It's a problem. Mm-hmm. And we hear this really scary voice.
Okay, sounds scary.
Is scary.
Is scary.
She's getting better.
Seems like could kill you.
Could kill you. Yeah, the Ator is not someone that you want to... I think later on he describes the Ator as there are some fairies in our world that give name to the legends that you were so afraid of.
Yes.
Growing up. And like this is one of them.
This is a nasty...
This is potentially our scariest thing yet that we have met.
We haven't seen it yet, so I don't know that it scared me as much as... You the foreboding is very real, and she does a very good job of making you afraid of this thing, and it's to the point where, like, you're kind of relieved you can't see it, right?
Yeah.
Because even though you can't see it, it's very sinister.
But
it is insidious.
It is that's a good word for it.
It is insidious.
And you know
it's
what?
just a feeling. It's just a voice and a feeling, and
giving all sorts of warnings.
And it's really...
all sorts of threats.
And we get our second mention of a Heart of Stone.
We do get our second mention of a Heart of Stone. And we also get this mention of she.
She is not happy.
Yeah. And what was the line that he has? It is, speak you so ill of she who holds your fate in her hands. So there is a she.
Yeah.
That we have not met, because this is now...
Who is clearly very powerful and very, very evil.
Interesting that there's a she haunting Feyre's nightmares as well.
Mm-hmm.
This creature is giving all sorts of warnings to Tamlin and Lucian. Lucian is saying, we're not like the other courts. We're not going to sit here and take the filth that you leave at our borders.
Well, and this kind of harkens back to the conversation that we overheard between Tamlin and Lucian at the very beginning, when he's like, enough is enough. Maybe it's time for us to take a stand. Let's do something. You know?
This is scary. Giving a warning, basically, is what this is. And when the Ator leaves, they are asking Feyre what she heard, and she very honestly says, nothing that I understood.
Yeah. And they don't explain anything to her.
No. Which is, nothing new. She's left in the dark about a lot of stuff. There's mentions of a court that he mentions a court, not the other courts, but like a court, which was interesting. And then we're kind of left with this really scary end to chapter 19, where this horrible thing has just happened, and then Tamlin goes inside and doesn't explain anything to Feyre.
Yeah, it's definitely very unsettling.
And Lucian gets very concerned that the Ator might have seen Feyre, which he didn't. But they are clearly scared of this thing, because clearly this thing is reporting to somebody else.
This was very unsettling it's very unsettling for us, the reader. It's clearly very unsettling to each of the characters, but we don't really understand why it's so unsettling to Tamlin and Lucian yet.
And that is the conclusion of our 4 chapters. So, this is your warning!
We are transitioning into the spoiler section.
Yes. Spoilers abound, sirens, Nino.
Yeah, and
Exit
not just
now.
for ACOTAR. There will be references to Throne of Glass and Crescent City, so if you have not read those books yet and you do not want spoilers, I'm so sorry, but we cannot advise that you stay. But we do very much hope that you come back and join us next episode for Cal and I.
Oh my god, that's so much to talk about in
It's such
Cal
an
and I.
important episode, you guys. Please come back and talk about it. It's going to be so much fun. Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
We love you all very much.
Whew. Jessica,
Isabel.
where do we begin? So I know what I wanted to start with.
Okay.
I want to start with Feyre's nightmares.
All right.
They are all being, first of all, these are being sent to her by Reese, right?
I don't
know
know.
if it's intentionally or
I don't know if he's
unintentionally.
sending them to her, but I do think this is an effect of the mating bond.
Mm-hmm.
Because the things that she is seeing in her mind.
She could never know. It's the blood red
It's the
nails,
nails.
and the pale woman ripping her apart. First of all, SJM gets very, very graphic with these nightmares.
She does.
Really gory.
No, she does.
And
It was, yeah. I didn't like the AI voice reading those to me either.
it kind of leads me to wonder, like, when Feyre asked this questions, can humans and that's this moment where she's like, can humans and Fae even have a mating bond?
Dun-dun-dun.
This is an indicator that they can, because we know this has got to be coming from her
Well,
connection with
Isabel.
Bryce, but it also could be like, why is she able to? Who are Feyre's parents? How is she able to receive these images into her head? Why is Nesta? Why is she able to
was gonna
reject
say-
Tamlin's glamour?
Right. We find out later in this book that the glamour doesn't work on Nesta. Everything that Tamlin said they wouldn't remember, Nesta remembers.
And it's like, I was reading this again, and I was just like, we get no information as to who really. We get some about her dad and
But we learn nothing about
Wings
her
Room.
mother.
It's like SJM is on purposely leaving information out about her mother. She gives us the bare minimum to paint a picture in our heads and feed us a story. But if I know anything about SJM, it's that she doesn't do anything by accident.
No, and she doesn't do anything without a purpose too. And this was one of my favorite questions you've ever posed. And I love the trail that it took us down, because we started talking about what we do know about Feyre's mother and about how harsh and cruel she was.
Yes, exactly.
And we started
What does
realizing
that sound like?
we started realizing that the generation of High Lords of parents,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like Tamlin's parents, Lucian's parents, even Rhys's parents, his father, they have this very brutal, harsh, no compassion, no remorse. That is exactly the way that Feyre describes her mother.
Yeah. And I could just be grasping at strings, but I feel
mean,
like
we
haven't.
could be, but I also, again,
This is what's so much fun about these books.
there is no such thing as coincidence, I don't think, in a Sarah J. Maas book. Which is incredible.
And we know that Elaine gets Cleopatra. I don't know what we haven't had her book yet, right? So
But we
don't
also
know
and we also
what
know that
she was feeling when this originally happened to her, or how she
and
is
when
before.
Feyre was even painting before, and think about how it is almost unbelievable that Feyre was able to learn and accomplish so much on her own. How many average human girls could have done that?
It's just such an interesting
Do you know who it makes me think of?
Who?
It makes me think of a very certain Queen of Terrasen who was trapped in a human's body for a very long time and was able to do things that other human women shouldn't be able to do.
I love these books. Oh my god. I just love that we know
This
that
is just so fun.
enough theories that happened before her most recent books came out. There was enough theorizing that came true that it is so much fun to talk these things through, because you just never know what could come true.
No.
You never know what SJM is going to throw at you, which is why it is just...
I haven't even Googled who is Feyre's mother yet, and
Neither
I'm very excited to go down that Reddit rabbit hole.
Another thing I wanted to touch on was, this is a small note, but I think one worth mentioning, because the wings on the Blue Fairy, the way he kept on saying, she took my wings, this isn't a spoiler or anything really, but I think it was a good indicator of how precious wings are to all of her characters across the universe. not just in ACOTAR, but we know Hunt in Crescent City.
Oh my god,
there
that
is
was
nothing more
so
traumatic.
hard to read.
There is nothing more traumatic that can happen to a character.
To a winged character.
Than their wings being taken away. It is literally like worse than death for them. To live without wings is a fate worse than death. When I was rereading it after having read everything else.
Yeah. Well, and in, when Cassian's wings are shredded.
And I forget who says it in which book, but someone says, I would rather die than not have my wings. And it's just so sad.
And the way the Illyrians clip females' wings.
I actually just got chill. It makes me sick. Because the joy of flight and that being taken away.
It's like, it's freedom, I think, in so many ways for them. It's so essential to who they are. That really, there was just something about that scene that really, really, really I don't remember it affecting me that much. I was very sad reading it the first time through, but for whatever reason, this time it just really...
It might honestly be because we've read everything else now.
That could be.
As well. Speaking of fairies. This fairy who Lucian fell in love with. This was such a fun little Easter egg to reread.
No, it really was, because she hasn't been named yet, has she?
No, but we know that it's Jesminda.
Jesminda, who is, all we know is, actually we don't even know for sure if she was an Autumn Court fairy, do we? We just know
that
she was a lesser fae.
Yes, like she was not a high fae.
No, she was a lesser fae, such as, I don't know, a river nymph.
What other characters do we know that
perhaps one with nymphs? Rather large
blue eyes,
turquoise eyes,
and red hair.
Since wine. Unwell. We'll have to track down.
This is all
I
over
honestly
the internet.
don't even remember where we saw this first. But yes, please go and seek out the source.
Theories that Lucian is potentially
Quinn's dad. Oh my god. Which would be just such a tough blow for Asriel. I can't decide if I want it to be true or not. I really can't, because on the one hand, it would be like so cool for Lucian to like have a daughter.
I know.
But it would also be like,
especially since he can't have, his mate doesn't seem to be that interested in him.
I'm remaining optimistic.
I know, me too. God, I just need Lucian to have a happy ending.
I do too. I really, 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 really need that. But
and I'll have to go back and look at what Gwen says about her mother.
It just really cannot. Lucian has been through so much already that I'm going to be really upset if he finds out that not only was his mate trying to get with Asriel, but also that Asriel ends up getting potentially with his daughter. That is literally insult to injury.
It's just very tough.
It's really tough.
But what is also interesting was that we find all this stuff out about Lucian's past and how cruel his brothers and his
father.
Fucking Baron, man. Pardon my French.
Baron's a dick.
And so is Eris. Although he has some... I think Eris is a dick. I stand by that statement. All the stuff
I think Eris has to be a dick. There's another character... Wow, I'm having a moment like you did with what we think turned out to be Zorro. There's a character in a movie that I feel like we both love who has had to... Oh, no, I know who I'm thinking of.
Who?
Aedion.
Oh,
the whole time he was in service to the King of Adarlan, he had to become this nasty, scary guy so that he could survive and actually, like, keep hope alive.
Yeah, that's right, because then...
And eventually...
Silver Flames, Eris is working with the Night Court.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And low-key, I know Nessian is like absolutely a ship that I will never touch ever, but for the very briefest of seconds, I was here for the Nesta and Eris train.
Absolutely not. Nope. I could not disagree with you more.
It gave me Hermione and Draco for just a second. Which
is a fan fiction that I struggle with.
But
You don't. I know.
It should have been canon, in my opinion.
Understood. This is where we fork in the road.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It is.
It keeps things exciting between us. But I also think it's interesting that...
respect me.
Of course I respect you and love you. You are my soulmate.
You just didn't say it back. So.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So we'll never do that again. But interesting that Lucian is still paying homage to his Autumn Court roots in his bedroom, especially after learning all of this.
I think it's because he loves his mom.
I also love his mom, and I don't even know anything about her.
I need
I know.
Helion and the Lady A novella
I know.
before SJM is. She cannot. I'm not saying I need it next. I know there are lots of other things that must come first. But if I make any request of her, I think it will be.
If somehow she is listening to this.
If this ever reaches your ears, Sarah, I would really love. Even just
doesn't even need to be as long as Frost and Starlight.
Honestly, even just a one shot. Like, can I just...
A bonus chapter, if you will.
Yes!
No, you need more than that. You need, like, at least 3.
I would really just even be okay. Like, even if it's just, like, a little, like, epilogue snippet. Like, maybe one day Eris becomes High Lord and Baron's deposed and she's free. And Eris, like, looks at her and he's like, just be happy. And then what if she just, like, arrives in the day court?
Oh my god, you're gonna start crying. Me too.
No, I'm not.
I literally can see your eyes glossing over.
I'm excited.
I did want to touch on this one little moment that I did mention in the main section of the podcast. It was this line when Feyre says that Tamlin never gives her details about anything that he's doing, and she never presumes to ask. And this is so
Oh my god,
different.
yes. I was thinking the exact same thing. Such a dichotomy between the way things go with she and Rhys when she's in the Night Court. Because he's always telling her about stuff.
Well, he always gives her the choice, right? And that's what it comes down to. He is all about choice. And this is something like Tamlin never actually, and the more I read this.
He is, but he also sent her into the Weaver's house.
She didn't have to go. She chose to go, but she didn't have to go. It's always about that with him. Like, he always asks her, how much do you want to know about something? I will tell you anything because you are my equal.
Well, he didn't tell her that it was her engagement ring in there she was going to get, did he?
No, he was being crafty. If she had actually been
I'm just saying,
danger...
Rhys is not untouchable.
That is true. He makes mistakes.
I ship them, and they are mates, and they are the OG love story that made me fall in love with this whole world, and I will love them forever.
No, he makes mistakes, and he pisses me off later on in his books. You know that.
He and Edward Cullen have some similarities that we'll get to eventually.
Absolutely. I mean, you know that I have
Breaking Dawn
major problems with Rhys in book 5.
Parallels in
I do a
Silver
180 with
Flames.
him, like, in Silver Flames. I mean, I still love him, obviously, because I know it's all coming from a place of, fear. But, like, my God, it is borderline not okay. Yeah, no, it's very Edward Cullen-y. But we're not there yet, and comparing this to how we see Rhys and Feyre in Mist and Fury, it really, that line stood out to me because it is so different to how he treats Feyre.
And Tamlin doesn't, I think the biggest difference is that Tamlin doesn't
wrong.
empower her to ask questions. She feels like she needs to stay in her corner.
Yes, that's
and
what it comes down
mind
to.
her place. And that's very, very, very different from the way that she is treated in the Night Court. Speaking of the Night Court, I have a question that I would like to pose to the community.
Okay.
Why is there a pool of starlight
I was
in
thinking
a court that
too.
is anywhere that's not the Night Court?
I was thinking that as well, and I wondered if it was an Easter egg or I wonder if it was just like a red herring, because anytime I see the word night or stars or anything related to the Night Court,
and she loves the pool of starlight.
And the feeling of it on her,
loves it. It just
what's it
that
doing
just that just did a little for me. I was like,
little antennas, they went up.
And another thing that I started thinking about while I was reading this chapter was the amount now that we know about Rhys and Tamlin's history. And we get this nod to my family was killed by the High Lord of another court.
An enemy court, he says.
Of an enemy court, yes, that's right. Which, of course, did he tell the other half of that story?
No. And we'll get into that later because I feel like I really need to do my homework before I start speaking.
Yeah. We won't get into all of that.
But it is very important to know.
It just got me sort of thinking about it because he's also talking about being in the war band, and we know
there were Illyrians.
There were Illyrians there, and we know that he and Rhys had been
friends.
They were friends for a very long time, and I started wondering
That's
while
why they
he
both
was
feel his betrayal so deeply.
I know, and you made the point a while back that there's more to learn about their history.
Anytime I don't fully understand something in SJM's universe, I am like,
it's because we don't know everything yet.
There are pieces of this puzzle that we do not have yet.
and she's
That's
doing that
such a
on
good point.
on
I really
purpose.
agree with you. The wheels in my head were definitely starting to turn because I was thinking to myself, I was wondering if Tamlin was thinking about Rhys as he was. You know he is.
But you know what was also really interesting to me with that line? The line is, it's like, unfortunately, it says fortunately or unfortunately. And that struck me, like, I didn't even think about it until the third time that I read it. Why does he say fortunately or unfortunately?
Well, because he hated his dad.
He hated his dad.
He hated his dad, and his brothers would have killed him because his powers. He was becoming so strong that it was
clear that it was going.
It was becoming very clear that he
yes.
was going to be the heir of the court. That's.
But I also thought about, like, and that's an excellent point. But I also thought about it in the context of, like, is he referencing somehow his relationship with Rhys there, and, like, does he in some way know that what Rhys did to him isn't truly Rhys's fault? And I don't know if that's a reach. I think that somehow, like, given what we know and how angry Rhys is at Tamlin and Tamlin is at Rhys, like, I think that Tamlin assumes some responsibility for this, but I just don't think he admits that to Rhys. And we'll have to come back to this later.
Well, it is a situation that got so out of hand, you can actually
so
no
quickly.
longer trace blame to any one party. And I think that also speaks to the generation of, you and I had this discussion, the generation of High Lords sort of before where we are now with Tarquin and Rhys and Tamlin. There was, and Callias, I think all of those High Lords were raised by a generation of High Lords who had no interest in harmony amongst the courts at all.
Yeah. That's a good point, too.
And I think the effects of that...
It's a very modern idea, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that what happened with Amarantha gave them a common enemy instead of being...
That's a huge point.
Instead of all of them looking around at seeing threats in all of the other courts, then all of a sudden the one good outcome of this was that they all went through this together and they were terrorized by Amarantha together. And it broke down those walls, and I think when you're in the trenches like that with people, you no longer see them as adversaries. You see them as...
Totally agree.
As people who you have this shared experience with. And I think we're, especially for what comes next in ACOTAR with the war against Hybern, if they had not all been under the mountain together, I don't think they would have ever been able to stand.
The outcome would have been very different.
Yes.
I love that point that you just made. A couple other tiny things I want to mention. This one you actually said to me, I forget if it was today or yesterday, but very small references of burning in hell.
Hell.
And that always surprised me because, like, I feel like we're in a foreign world here, a completely different universe.
Well, it made me think of Crescent City.
Yeah, exactly. And before, when I read this, I was like, oh, it's like heaven, hell, which is weird for, like, this genre that we're reading.
And then you read Crescent City and you're
like,
oh!
Different. And I wonder if it's the same hell. But anyway, I don't think we know the answer. We definitely do not. But it's just an interesting little...
Is it spelled with...
In this one, it's spelled with two
L's.
Whereas in Crescent City, it's spelled with one. But we know that doesn't mean anything. That could just be like a difference in time and years. We don't know. Yeah. We don't know how much time and space, which is a complete construct in this universe, is separating each of these universes. And the last thing that is always so fun to pick up on little Easter eggs when you know what comes down the line, and like when you're rereading it, you're like, oh, here's the answer to that riddle, the Heart of Stone.
It's yes, and that has been mind-boggling me this entire time because being the terrible
a quick
reader that I am, I 1,000% missed this Heart of Stone detail.
Which is so funny because me rereading it, I was like, oh my god, the Heart of Stone, here it is, and
it's not even in, and I don't even think in hindsight, I don't even think it's that I didn't read it. I think it's that I was just so overwhelmed by the stress of the moment that I blacked out.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's actually happened to me with multiple.
I had just completely forgotten. It was so overshadowed by all the trauma that happens afterwards, and Rhys yelling her name.
I mean,
and, no.
I understand.
Oh my god,
I understand the trauma of reading an SJM book. Yeah. Lest you forget the end of Crescent City 1. And 2, for that matter.
Oh my god, light it up. Light it up. Well,
I think that
that'll do it. Oh no, are we gonna have to end every episode with that?
I mean, we might have to. Makes
From
me
now
giggle. Thank you if you are still with us. We appreciate you.
We love you more than we can express.
I think this might have been my favorite episode so far.
I think we say that every episode, but I think that's a good thing.
It gets more and more fun.
It really does.
'Cause there are more and more Easter eggs.
Well, the content is getting juicier and juicier.
Yes, not just with the spice, but with the plot and the characters.
It's just very exciting.
It's all very exciting. It's very exciting, and we have got a lot coming up in the next episode. We have Cal and I,
and
if you know, you know, and if you don't know yet,
strap in.
oh my god.
A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we finish. Please be sure to give us a follow, a subscribe. We are on all your favorite social media channels, so you can get us on Instagram at _greatest genre, on Twitter at greatest genre. You can email us at thegreatestgenre@gmail.com. We want to hear from all of you.
Yes.
We are so excited to continue this journey. And I think that is it. We will see you next for episode 5. We'll be diving into chapters 20 through 25, we think. We reserve the right to switch that, but I think that's what it's going to be.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Thank you all so much.
Jessica, it's been a pleasure.
Cheers.